It was so bad that I didn't think there was any way that we were going to make it out there. Lightning all around.
The wind was very intense. Visibility was next to zero.
We had torrential rain. We had people swept away in their cars.
I couldn't imagine water ever rushing like this. The noise and the roar, the rumble.
As I was swept off the bridge, I could feel the top of the guardrail with the bottom of my feet. And I remember thinking, this isn't happening.
From the Weather Channel, this is Storm Stories with meteorologist Jim Cantori.
November 15th, 2001. The rain that started the day before continues to wash over Austin, Texas. Around 8 a.m., Sharon Zambrzycki navigates the wet roads on her way to work. Sharon lives with her husband Rick in the suburb of Pflugerville. She's the state director of volunteer and community services and not in the habit of letting the weather slow her down.
I wasn't particularly apprehensive. I drive a lot in my job, so I need to be careful in what you're supposed to do.
Today, Sharon drives 70 miles northeast of Austin for a seminar. While she's away, the city is pounded by severe thunderstorms and torrential rain. The storm is caused by a low-pressure system parked over West Texas. The rain is fed by moisture sweeping in from the Gulf of Mexico. The combination creates heavy rain and multiple tornadoes. KXAN TV meteorologist Jim Spencer is concerned about the wild weather.
Continuous rain, torrential, all day long, tornadoes dropping out of the sky. It was unlike anything I've ever seen. The rainfall rates were as high as 5 inches per hour that day.
By afternoon, placid creeks become teeming rivers. They break their banks and water rushes into the city. The result? Flash flooding. Neighborhood streets and major roadways are overrun. By mid-afternoon, Spencer is on the air with continuous storm coverage.
It's got a new river flood warning we want to relay to you folks down in.
We kind of bounced back and forth between the tornado warnings and the flash flood warnings. We had some amazing pictures live on the air of the cars that were floating.
Let me just tell you exactly what we're seeing and show you. Check this out. This is Shoal Creek. I've never seen anything like this. That is Temple Lamar. It's a virtual lake right now.
The evening rush hour hits, and so does another wave of torrential rain. More roads flood. Motorists become stranded. Around 5 o'clock, Sharon Zambrzycki heads home and straight into the flood.
And the closer I got to Austin, the worse the weather became. It was dark. Rain was very heavy. I was driving slower, hit some water on the road a few times, watched some people speeding by me and fishtailing.
While Sharon inches through the flooded streets, she nears a bridge 20 miles northeast of Austin. The bridge spans a stream known as Brushy Creek.
My mind on that point was not any concern over the creek that I was going to cross, because it normally is 15, 20 feet below the bridge, and probably most of the time you don't even know you're going over it.
Sharon does not know that the heavy rain has caused this typically shallow creek to rise over the top of the bridge. Once she reaches Brushy Creek, it's dark and visibility is poor. At first, she doesn't even realize she's on the bridge.
As I came into what appeared to be water on the road, I could tell immediately that it was fast rising water, rapidly rising water. So I stopped. I knew that was a situation not to drive into.
Sharon tries to back up, but she's boxed in by the cars behind her. Up ahead, an oncoming car tries to cross the flooded bridge.
As that car came towards me, you could just see the water rising. I mean, you could just see it getting up to the headlights. So I used my cell phone to call 911.
911, what is the address of the emergency?
The operator tells her that other calls have already come in and help is on the way. The approaching car is now dead in the water. A woman gets out and Sharon signals her to get in Sharon's car. As the stranger climbs in with her, water, now over a foot deep, rushes through the door. Within seconds, Sharon's car begins to float, and the two women decide it's time to bail out. Just then, a young man in the car behind them wades up to Sharon's window.
He was kind of holding his arms. We've got to get out of here. We've got to go.
The man returns to his car as Sharon and the other woman make their way through the water. They only manage a few steps before they are hit by a fast-moving, chest-high torrent of water.
The water just grabbed us and just shoved us. I lost her, we lost the car. As I was swept off the bridge, I could feel the top of the guardrail with the bottom of my feet. And I remember thinking, this isn't happening. This isn't real.
Sharon Zambrzycki and the other woman and man from the bridge are now careening down the raging creek. Sharon's heavy clothes weigh her down, so she kicks off her shoes and pants.
I could make out shadows. I had my head above water and was doing sort of a breaststroke. I started looking for trees. They find people in trees.
Finally, 300 yards downstream, Sharon is able to grab onto a tree.
It was big enough to be strong and sturdy, but small enough that I really could get my arms around it.
Back at the bridge, police arriving on the scene radio for help. Firefighters Tim Wallace, Trevor Stokes, and Thomas Lott respond to the call.
We were buckling down, preparing for the worst, but I never could have imagined water flowing like that.
Just then, the skies let loose another round of torrential rain. The firefighters can barely see through the downpour as they begin their search for Sharon and the other motorists.
The rain was probably one of the hardest rains I've ever known. It just pounded and didn't stop.
Wallace and Stokes combed the banks of the swollen creek.
It was yelling into the dark. We couldn't see anything, even with the spotlights we had. There was so much underbrush and debris in the water.
The water's going and getting deeper and deeper and faster that you're just like, there's no way no one could survive that.
The noise and the roar, the rumble, how somebody could be out here still.
But Sharon Zambrzycki is still out there.
I saw big flashlights and hollering. I started hollering, I'm here, hello.
But the firefighters can't hear Sharon over the roaring flood.
I kind of thought it was a lost cause.
At that moment, they pick up a faint cry coming from the creek. The firefighters spring into action.
We began rigging each other up, getting ourselves ready to go, getting lines in order.
The firefighters secure a rope to the shore and wade into the creek. They fight their way through the water until they reach a tree 20 feet upstream. Wallace throws a lifeline to Sharon.
We made an awesome pass at that point. First time hit with the life preserver and the rope.
He had a perfect arm. I was able to grab it as it went by. It was just perfect.
Sharon hangs onto the tree with one arm and uses her other hand to tie the rope around her chest. Upstream, Tim Wallace realizes that the water is just too dangerous and orders Stokes back to shore. Wallace then tethers himself to the tree and waits with Sharon for help to arrive. Linked by a single rope, Sharon and the firefighter are pounded by water, rushing up to 40 miles an hour.
He kept saying, keep your head above water, darling. He kept calling me darling. I could tell he was a nice young man. He had come to save me, and he was calling me darling. I was going to do anything he said.
Sharon clings to the tree for another 20 minutes, unaware that the water is slowly eating away at the trunk. Suddenly, the tree snaps.
She actually floated downstream away from me.
I got to the next tree, grabbed it, but it was much bigger. And so I couldn't really put my arms all the way around it.
The tree that broke away is now tangled in Sharon's rope. The weight drags her underwater.
She was like a bobber on the end of a fishing line. She was under and up, under and up. And I was like, can you hold on?
I was really struggling, and I thought, I don't know how long I can hold my breath.
After nearly half an hour, fatigue and hypothermia are taking hold.
My mind would start spinning. I remember getting upset and mad, and this doesn't look good.
On the night of November 15th, 2001, in Austin, Texas, severe thunderstorms dump up to 13 inches of rain, most of it in under 6 hours. Flash floods erupt. Creeks become raging rivers, and roads turn into lakes. 20 miles northeast of the city, floodwaters have swept Sharon Zambrzycki and 2 other motorists off a bridge. Sharon has tumbled 300 yards down Brushy Creek and is now clinging to a tree as she struggles to keep her head above water. She is tethered to firefighter Tim Wallace, who is also trapped in the flood 20 feet upstream.
I thought, I've heard that drowning is easy, that it's not painful. And I thought, how do they know drowning is easy? Who tells them that?
An emergency call goes out for an airlift to pull Sharon and Tim from the creek. The call is dispatched to Shock Trauma Air Rescue, or Starflight. The team is led by helicopter pilot Kevin McDonald. McDonald saw his share of dangerous weather in the Navy, but he's never witnessed anything like this. Tonight, he'll have to decide if it's safe to fly.
The wind was very intense, and the rain was coming down sideways for most of the night. I was very close to aborting the mission because of the weather conditions.
But McDonald is not ready to give up. He knows there's a freeway that leads directly to the creek. It just might be possible to follow it straight to Sharon Zambrzycki.
We call it flying the concrete compass because that was basically all we could see was the highway, the headlights on the highway, and the power lines that run along beside it. We had to fly at an altitude of about 50 feet in order to maintain a visual reference with the ground.
Flying with McDonald is veteran rescuer Jim Alday and rookie crew chief Chris Jones-Piercy.
I was very nervous. The weather was incredibly bad, lightning all around. I had butterflies in my stomach.
After the risky 12-mile flight, McDonald spots the creek below. He begins sweeping the area looking for Sharon and firefighter Tim Wallace. Chris Jones-Piercy opens the door to get a better look.
We started our search downstream and moved up. I was getting hit in the face with rain continuously.
Finally, Zambrzycki is spotted, and the crew decides to lower Jim Alday on a 40-foot rope.
And then what I will do will be to attach the victim to what we refer to as a cinch collar, which cinches around their body and helps hold them in place.
They were hovering above her. And I got excited, I was like, all right, here we go. The helicopter hovered right above the water, and it was just water pelting you in the face and spitting, you couldn't see.
Sharon is exhausted. She's been in the water for nearly 2 hours, fighting to keep her head above the rapids.
There was this great big light and this man in a yellow helmet saying, put your arm through here. Okay, now put your arm through here.
But Jim Alday can't see that a rope is already tied around Sharon's waist and pinned under a log. The chopper begins to rise, and Sharon struggles to tell him.
I'm gasping for air. I'm sputtering. The noise is horrendous, and I'm trying to tell him about the rope. I'm going, rope. And I had this vision of being pulled in half. And I could just see half of me going up and half of me going down the creek. And I thought, they're going to be awfully disappointed if they only get half of me.
Luckily, Jim Allday spots the safety line in time.
I see this rope and I see it starting to get tighter, and now I'm real concerned, oh my God, we're getting ready to squeeze the life out of her. And so I quickly signaled my crew chief.
I told Kevin to, hold your hover, and he came down about 5 feet to give Jim enough room to cut her free. At that point, Jim was already taking his knife out.
Cut the rope, and then as soon as that was free, then motioned to Chris, okay, continue on up, we're now clear.
As McDonald slowly lifts the two out of the water, Allday gets a good look at Sharon.
She was so limp and so pale, I wasn't sure, is she still breathing? It was obvious that she was very fatigued, probably very hypothermic, and probably pretty close to maybe passing out.
Sharon remembers being exhausted, yet relieved to be safe at last.
I have never felt so relaxed. Totally 125% relaxed, as I was dangling half naked from a harness under a helicopter.
I couldn't believe that she was still alive. And when we laid her on the ground and she was just kind of laying there, there was a moment when I thought, she's still breathing.
Remarkably, Sharon is able to stand up.
And then she kind of bobbled off with 2 firefighters to the ambulance.
Starflight lifts off again and rescues firefighter Tim Wallace as Sharon is rushed to the hospital. She arrives with a body temperature of 92 degrees, shivering uncontrollably. Her shaking is a sign of recovery. With warm blankets and a hot shower, Sharon Zambrzycki is going to be all right.
Lying in that hospital bed was just a whole collage of emotions. I remember thinking, I'm so glad I'm okay.
Back at the bridge, rescuers are still looking for the 2 other drivers who were swept into Brushy Creek.
It's been reported and it's now confirmed that there's a male subject and another female subject who we cannot locate. And we're very sure that they're somewhere downstream from here, hopefully still alive. We're looking right now.
On November 16, 2001, 2 motorists are still missing from a flash flood at Brushy Creek near Austin, Texas. They are the man and woman who were swept off the bridge along with Sharon Zambrzycki. As the water recedes, the car of one driver is found in the creek. Crews drag it to shore while rescuers on jet skis continue the search. That afternoon, they recover a woman's body 600 yards from the bridge. She is identified as 59-year-old Jolie Jesse. 6 miles further downstream, they find the man's body, 27-year-old Chow Do.
We had 10 people in our area die that day due to weather-related incidents. 8 of them were swept away in floodwaters.
The flash flood also damaged or destroyed thousands of homes and businesses. Losses totaled more than $25 million. Today, the threat of flash flooding is as great as ever. Austin is located in a part of Texas known as the Hill Country. The rolling terrain is beautiful, but also rocky with thin topsoil.
As a result, when we have rain, it runs off very, very quickly, and flash flooding is very common around here.
That's how Central Texas became known as Flash Flood Alley. Sharon Zambrzycki and her husband Rick are grateful she survived her ordeal in the Brushy Creek flash flood. Sharon hasn't forgotten that she is the only person to be pulled from the creek alive.
For the first year, I probably thought about them and the event every day. I still go over that bridge frequently, and every time I do, I shed a tear.
She knows she would not be here today without the firefighters and Starflight crew who risked their lives to save her.
Seeing my life on the end of that line also, that double whammied me. I really respect and appreciate life, and every day I'm here.
I knew I was changed, and it takes a while before you can even begin to describe it. It's certainly appreciation for everything.
I love you. She wanted to live, definitely. I think that's the only reason she's here today.
When I think back to Sharon's rescue, the thing that I remember the most is how close we came to aborting the mission in the first place. You cannot overstate the importance that the weather plays in this line of work.
I've never been afraid of the water, ever, never. And that night I was very afraid of the water, very afraid of it.
What should you do if you're ever swept up in a flash flood? We'll tell you when Storm Stories continues. So what should you do if you're ever swept up in a flash flood? First, try to float on your back with your legs pointing downstream. Use your feet to deflect debris. If something pins you down, try to climb on top of it. Finally, try to work your way to shore. If you manage to do all of this, consider yourself extremely lucky. Over the last 30 years, more people have died in floods than in hurricanes and tornadoes combined. For Storm Stories, I'm meteorologist Jim Cantori. Your local forecast is next.